number 8 in our course, The Modern Novel. Today I will be talking to you about modernism and the novel. In our previous lectures we talked about the development of realism in the novel. And this is, as you remember, realism was a movement that believed in the possibility of capturing reality as it is. For the first time, literature was able to reflect the lives of ordinary people, was able to reflect the aspects of social reality like poverty, like oppression, like scientific developments. These are sides of life that were not allowed serious treatment in literature. And with the development of realism, for the first time we see the average human being, the average citizen, as a tragic hero of serious literature. Well, by the end of the 19th century, we find that there is already a dissatisfaction with realism, that there is already voices, critics, novelists, artists, who say that this realism is just an illusion and that there is a lot of problems about it. So today I want to talk to you about this transition from realism to modernism. By the end of the 19th century, artists and novelists were already becoming unsatisfied with realism. We find by the end of the 19th century a rejection of realism and naturalism becoming already common. And we find the appearance of a wide range of experimental and avant-garde trends, movements like Dadaism, Surrealism, Expressionism, Futurism, all of them rejecting the framework of realism and arguing that literature, to be authentic, to be real, to be truthful, it has to go beyond the illusion of realism. What these people were saying basically is that realism is impossible. What you have are only illusions of realism. These movements were a reaction to the modern urban experience, because cities are becoming bigger and crowded, science is becoming more complicated, life is becoming more stressful. So the idea that life is just out there and the novelist just needs to depict it and put it in a novel is becoming now difficult to support as an idea. There is also by the end of the 19th century, there is a rejection of bourgeois values and bourgeois morality. Realism stressed, as you remember, realism stressed the role of art as a mirror of social reality. It also stressed the values of bourgeois society and the morality of bourgeois society, and also stressed notions like progress, for example. Well, modernism questions all of these. Modernism questioned the capability of art to reflect reality, that it's impossible, that art or novels or plays cannot reflect reality. It questioned the coherence of that reality by saying basically that reality is not coherent, so you cannot capture it in a coherent novel. And they also questioned the values of bourgeois society and the morality of bourgeois society and notions of happiness and progress and so on and so forth. These movements, these modernist movements, argued that life and reality are not coherent or simple, and it is an illusion to think that the novel or art in general can simply depict them like a mirror and put them in an artwork without any difficulties or problems. They also argued that bourgeois values and bourgeois morality are fake and superficial. And what modernism stressed instead were characteristics of the modern society that are becoming more and more obvious. First of all, that reality is characterized by fragmentation and discontinuity, right? I mean, when you read the realist novel, it's a story that has a beginning, a middle, and an end, and everything is coherent, and everything is clear. And, well, modernism argues that this is not how life is. Life is fragmented and discontinuous, and it is almost impossible to capture it as a coherent and realist story, because that's not how life is. So they stressed forms of expression that stress juxtaposition, multiplicity of points of views. They also stressed the lack of a unitary self, even the notion of the self. For the realist, the self was unproblematic. There was nothing problematic about the self. The self, it's myself, it's yourself, it's the bourgeois subject, it's the 19th century Victorian subject. Well, modernism sees the self itself as lacking unity and coherence. The self of a person, the self of a subject, is fragmented and incoherent sometimes and discontinuous. And they saw the concept of a unified, coherent self as an artificial construct. It's a fiction. It's a social fiction that bourgeois Victorian society created to make itself feel good. That the real self is fragmented and complex and incoherent. So the individual, in modernism, the individual is stripped of the traditional defining characteristics of personhood. The individual is no more just a person with no problems. The individual now is a fragmented self, lacking coherence and presenting multiple perspectives and multiple points of views. Modernist fiction also stressed crises rather than coherent reality. It also attempts to represent multiple truths as reflected in consciousness and the psyche. So art and the novel, if it wants to be truthful, it has to reflect multiple truths, because this is how life is. Life presents us with a multiplicity of point of views and a multiplicity of truths. They also rejected an external, unitary, coherent appearance of reality, of realist conventions, and stressed a lack of causality. A lot of things in life happen without a cause. There is no cause. And they also stressed another thing they stressed is the insufficiency of language, the incapability of language to represent reality accurately. In addition, they also stressed the relationship of the individual became more problematic. So whereas for realism the individual is part of a social group, a Victorian society, and the individual is a constitutive part of this society, for modernist art and modernist fiction, the individual is constantly in opposition to the social group, and there is an element of alienation. The individual is all the time alien and feeling alienated by his own environment, by his own society, by his own social group, and so on. Modernist fiction also, and modernist philosophy and modernist art, was anti-bourgeois, anti-Victorian. They opposed the Victorian value system and opposed bourgeois society and middle-class values of the Victorian society, because they argued bourgeois values and lifestyles are fake and superficial. Modernist fiction also uses first-person narrators, and he or she is often unreliable. So even when you read a first-person novel, the narrator that talks to you is often unreliable. So it puts you in the difficult position of deciding whether you can trust this narrator or not trust him. Modernist fiction also reflects a sense of urban dislocation and alienation. The modernist works by male writers are often misogynistic, and they're not nice to women. They don't present women in a favorable position. For comparison, I have included in your slides a small comparison between realist art, like for example Edouard Manet. When you look at Manet's work or any realist art, you see an art that's clear. Reality is just there. For Manet, for example, it's an art that depicts a breakfast in a studio, and there is a gentleman, the painter Manet himself, who is sitting on the table, and the servant is bringing food, and everything is clear. But when you compare it to, for example, with the work of Picasso or Dali, you find a portrait or an art that's difficult to make sense of. So for example, Picasso's Weeping Woman, you can see it, a picture of it in the slides. You cannot tell if this is one person or two person or three persons, or if this is an object or a person. You cannot tell what exactly the object depicted is. The painting represents discontinuity and fragmentation. There is a juxtaposition of multiple points of views. There is a lack of a unitary coherent self, and the self is presented, the self is seen as an artificial construct, a social fiction of undetermined status. The individual in modernist fiction is stripped, loses the traditional defining characteristics of personhood, right? The individual is not a person. We don't know. The individual is a complicated mess. That's what modernism basically tells us. The same characteristics can be observed in the work of in Picasso's, for example, his famous painting called Guernica, which was done in 1937 and is a representation of the famous massacre of Guernica in Spain. It's also a fragmented painting. When you look at it, it's a scene where you can't tell what the objects are. They're half humans, half animals. You cannot tell. Some of them are objects, some of them are dead people. So it's clearly a scene of destruction and death, and it is represented like a nightmare, like moving figures whose shape is difficult to recognize. The same characteristics can be seen in the work, for example, of Salvador Dali. I have included a picture of his work here. And generally, these are the distinctions between realism and modernist fiction. So modernist fiction emerges by the 19th century, by the very late 19th century, around 1890s. It doesn't become accepted until the period after the First World War. But a number of novels that were written, for example, Heart of Darkness, which is the subject of our next lecture, was published in 1901, and it is a model, it is an example of modernist fiction presenting multiplicity of views, a complex reality that's difficult to depict, and so on and so forth. So I hope this is useful. and I look forward to seeing you in our next lecture, and when we talk about Heart of Darkness. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa ta'ala wa barakatuh.